All right. How games get balanced.
If you've spent any amount of time in a multiplayer lobby, you've probably heard terms like overpowered, cheap, and unfair.
No, this is vastly not the words that these gamers are using. All right. There are other words, gamer words, that gamers like to use.
What these players are arguing about is the game's balance. Balance is the art of making sure that all options in a multiplayer game are fair, so none are underpowered and thus pointless to use, and none
True.
are overpowered and thus dominate everything else. Here's the thing though, most video games aren't just striving for balance, but balance among a wide range of distinctly different options.
Which is very hard when you have, like, let's say a fighting game like this, and you have, like, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, there's 12, 1, 2, 3, 4 times 4. You know, when you have this many characters, you know, it's hard to, balance everybody. And this is just fighting games because, balance is great for competitive integrity, but not necessarily great for fun. Because if you want balance, go play like checkers or chess or whatever, and even in those games, there's a slight advantage to one side or the other. So even those games aren't even balanced. But from the perspective of, competition, you should probably strive towards balance more so than randomness.
You don't have to work that hard to balance a symmetric game, which is one where all players have the exact same starting conditions. But most games are asymmetric, which means players are facing off against each other with completely different stuff. And in a game where players can pick from 74 different fighters or 140 unique champions, the developers are counting on them all being equally viable among players of roughly the same skill level. So how do they do it? Now I should say, balance is an incredibly difficult pursuit. It can be an entire department at certain companies, and Riot's League of Legends has had more than 200 balance patches in the last decade.
Well, one reason for that is because, in general, for games like League of Legends, like they're a live service, they're constantly coming out with new characters, new champions, whatever. It's really beneficial for them to make a character and the character to come out and be overpowered, because when a character comes out and is overpowered, there's like all this like hype around the character, so you're more likely to maybe buy the character with your money or whatever little point thingies you accrued or whatever. And then the new character comes out, I don't want to use the base skin, I gotta buy at least one skin, and because like what's a skin in League of Legends go for, like $5-10 or whatever. It's like, okay, the character's overpowered, that's good. Okay, I got a skin, now I'm a unique snowflake. Great, all right? So there's an incentive for them to come out with a character that's overpowered for like a couple months, and then on the next upcoming bug fix or patch or whatever, they nerf the character down. So when time goes on, that impression of the character being overpowered, even though it just got nerfed, not everybody is plugged into the game 24/7. So everyone's gonna be asking, oh, what's the new character? That's probably the overpowered character. Start playing that character, because the gamer is gonna have the impression of the character being overpowered, even if it got nerfed or whatever. So that thought is still in their heads. So they're probably gonna pick up the new character, so on and so forth.
Plus, it's not just about numbers, but player psychology, with Overwatch's Jeff Kaplan saying the perception of balance is more powerful than balance itself. So this is just not going to be an intensive tutorial. Instead, Game Maker's Toolkit presents a whirlwind tour through the way games are balanced and rebalanced, and rebalanced and rebalanced and rebalanced. So how do developers go about balancing a game in the first place? Well,
okay. So developers will have like some sort of intention of how they want the players to play their game, but that little funnel doesn't always go how they predict. Players are going to do whatever they can in whatever way to enjoy and play the game how they want. But players have their own way that they want to play the game, but the developers have their intended way to play the game. So that's one way.
Well, the first consideration is trade-offs. This is when you essentially cancel out a character's competitive advantages with drawbacks. Think of Mario Kart characters, where heavy racers like Donkey Kong have a high top speed but low acceleration, while featherweight racers like Toad are the opposite. On the right track design, they'll be almost evenly balanced. You can think of characters as having a power budget. At least that's what Riot calls it. Advantages are a cost, but disadvantages are a discount. If all characters are just about hitting the limit of the same power budget, they'll be closer to being balanced.
Right.
It's rarely that easy, of course. I mean, okay, sometimes you'll get a card that does 1 damage to all minions, and another that does 4 damage to all minions. That's an easy one. Just make the second card cost a bit more energy. But how do you calculate the power budget for completely incomparable options like heroes in Overwatch? Or options with dozens of stats to tweak, like when Bungie was reining in the initially overpowered sniper rifle in Halo 3, it had loads of stats it could tweak, such as clip size, time to full zoom, reload time, and max ammo. It ultimately decided that the best knob to tweak was the time between shots.
And this is Halo stats. If we were to look at like a Call of Duty game, it's like you look at a gun and it's got like so many bars or whatever. But to be honest, like the Call of Duty gun stats don't even correlate anything with like what is actually happening on the gun, to be fair.
Which it bumped from 0.5 seconds to 0.7 seconds. What's important though is to celebrate the big differences between
the red bars, the green bars, the white bars, up green arrows, up stonks, dollar signs, pluses.
Choices. The sniper rifle and the shotgun offer a more exciting choice to players than 2 types of assault rifle, even though the latter is much easier to balance. So I agree with ex-Blizzard designer Rob Pardo.
Make everything overpowered. Every unit, class, etc. should feel unstoppable. It doesn't cost anything extra to make something epic. Applies to both story and world. Avoid balance to mediocrity.
When he warns designers against using the maths to balance games into mediocrity, saying,
Otherwise, you're going to end up with a game, either an army game or classes, where everything kind of feels the same. And, you can high-five each other and say it's balanced, but is it fun? Probably not.
Another consideration is counters.
So the whole balance versus fun is always going to be an argument, because when you make a game, or I mean, at least in that one or whatever, I don't know what game he was talking about. So I'm just going to talk about this from like an FPS perspective. You can always play like put FPSs as like single player versus like multiplayer. You like for a single player experience, you want the game to be fun. All the guns should be like overpowered. Take Doom Eternal, great single player FPS. All the guns are awesome. But then when you take a competitive shooter like CS:GO, Valorant, Apex, so on and so forth. Then when all the guns are powerful, it's like the time to kill is like insanely short. Like no one's having any fun when everyone can kill anyone at any time. So you have to create some sort of balance, some sort of counterplay to your game.
This is when we give characters the ability to negate each other's moves and strategies. For example, a quick Zerg rush in StarCraft is all well and good unless your opponent is one step ahead and has already built defensive bunkers. And what we ideally want is for everything to have a counter. So a defensive StarCraft player can, in turn, be countered by a more economical strategy, where you save up resources to build units that can eventually crush those bunkers into dust. And we could make a counter to that counter, and so on.
Yeah.
But then we'd be here forever. There's a more elegant solution though, because how do you deal with someone who's sitting around saving up money? Well, a rush. And wouldn't you know it, it's rock, paper, scissors.
Yeah.
This goofy game you play to see who has to do the washing up might be incredibly simple and lacking any strategic depth, but it is perfectly balanced, because everything has a counter and everything is a counter.
So like on a basic level, the whole rock paper scissors thing is a fantastic concept to include in a lot of the I don't know, at least competitive games or whatever. You can even take Magic the Gathering as a even more great example, because what do they have? Like 5, 6 colors, or I don't know. Yeah, there's like so many colors that, and each color comes with its own concept of like gameplay strategies and whatnot. It's even more engaging. So if you can come up with more than just rock paper scissors, then more power to you.
Damn, man. Killed those scissors.
And that's why it forms the backbone of a lot of multiplayer games. Pretty much every fighting game has a system like this, such as Dead or Alive, which boasts about its triangle system where strikes beat throws, throws beat holds, and holds beat strikes. In strategy games, it's not just the strategies that work like this, but the individual units. And the different Pokemon types sit in a massive web of interlocking counters, but starting, of course, with fire, water, and grass. Rock, paper, scissors is a great balancing framework to start from because you can ensure that no element is overpowered. It's countered by something. And no choice is irrelevant. It at least works as a counter to something else. And also, in strategy games at least, it encourages mixed strategies. It makes you into a multidisciplinary player, and it forces you to switch tactics on the fly in a really dynamic way. And in class-based games, it's a great way of automatically making mixed teams. Take Team Fortress 2, where 7 of its 9 classes fit into a complex web of interlocking and interchangeable triangles of rock, paper, scissors. Here, teams must pick complementary classes to protect each other from weaknesses. If you're an engineer and spies keep sapping your sentries, then you're going to need to get one of your teammates to switch to pyro. These counters are often described as hard counters if they completely shut something down, like a punch is a hard counter to a throw in arms because it will nullify the effect every single time. But soft counters just mean one choice will have an advantage over the other. McCree will outperform Tracer, but his chance of winning is far from 100%. And when it comes to counters, it's really important to figure out what are the hands and what are the throws. The hands are the things that get locked in before the match even starts. You know, the characters and the races. The throws are the things you pick during the match. The moves, the units, and the strategies. And in a team-based game like Overwatch, the entire team is the hand, while the individual players are the throws.
This is actually like very interesting, because like when I went into this video, I was thinking, okay, just like balance numbers, balance like hitboxes, balance animations, make them longer or shorter or whatever. But the whole strategies thing is I was not thinking about that.
The throws are specifically designed to be unbalanced against each other to create that back and forth counterplay and teamwork. But the hands are supposed to be balanced, and so they should have access to all of the throws. If Zangief simply couldn't block, for example, he would be unusable. So you've got a bunch of characters with trade-offs and counters, and you think you've made them balanced. But how do you actually make sure that's true? Well, this is when we start collecting data, either from internal playtesters or the millions of people playing your game online.
And for that, we need to track everything.
Now you might think that all you need to do is track how often each character results in success, i.e. its win rate.
No, that is not the way. Because there have been so many times where even in like I'll use Apex as an example. Like the gun meta in Apex is always changing. It's constant. So for you to try to figure out, well, what's the good gun, what's the bad gun, is kind of hilarious. You know, when it's just based off of like, it's either like a binary yes/no thing. I think the more shit you track, the more inclusive that your data is going to be, or all encompassing, I'll say.
And if a character has a 50% win rate, it's balanced. But like all stats, this can be misleading. Imagine a fighting game with 3 characters, and if Ryu won every match against Chun-Li and lost every match against Cammy, his win rate would be 50%. Perfectly balanced though? I think not.
Right.
That's why matchup charts, where you can see the win rate of a character when played against all other characters, are so important.
Oh dang, did the ARMS team actually do this? This is actually insanely balanced. Like the whole, like what is this? These are supposed to be like 50-50s? Like down here, and then 51, 48 are the like the outliers. This is insanely balanced.
But even that's not going to tell you everything. Riot had a problem with the League of Legends character, Akali.
Okay, so on that chart before, I didn't even see it, but at the top it said the win percentages for the top 3% of players. So that's another thing to keep track of. So like if you're playing a game and you're trying to boast it has like some sort of like esports scene, the high skilled players are going to be playing the game differently than your, I don't know, mid-level players, and more so casual level players. So at each tier of skill, you can have vastly different like win rates for characters. So that's just something else to keep in the back of your head.
Numbers said she was pretty balanced, with a 44% win rate, perhaps a tad underpowered. So how come she secured a 72% win rate at the 2018 World Championship and was banned more times than any other champion?
Oh dang.
It's because while she was really powerful, she was difficult to play effectively. She had a super high skill floor, in other words. So while top tier players could use her to wipe the floor with the competition, the low ranking players using Akali were getting killed left, right and center.
Ooh.
Therefore, her win rate was being dragged down. That's why it's important to look at a character's win rate and matchups across all skill levels.
Yes.
And finally, win rate doesn't really tell you what's actually going on in the game. We need to know what characters people are actually picking. People might be avoiding a character who is otherwise well balanced because that character is not much fun to play.
It could be even a stupider reason because of that. It could be because they don't like how that character looks. You know, that is a 100% reason that players do or do not choose a character. I'm not choosing that character because I don't like how that character looks. It's just that simple.
Or is only useful in certain situations. Blizzard found that Overwatch hero Symmetra was a largely balanced character, but she wasn't being picked as much because her use was highly situational. So in her first complete redesign, they tried to make her more popular by giving her 2 ultimates to pick from, a teleporter and a shield generator. That's why player feedback is so important, as well as pick rate, which tells you how often a character is actually getting used. For Rainbow Six Siege, Ubisoft uses a matrix to cross-reference both win rate and pick rate, with different considerations needed for operators who fall into these 4 buckets. And the pick rates help tell you the state of the meta, which is essentially just the characters, cards, strategies and so on that the community at large have found the most effective and are currently using.
Yep, because players will always choose the path of least resistance. All right, players want to go into like a match or whatever, and they want to get the most desirable outcome for the least amount of effort. That's why S tier characters and D tier characters exist. You know, no one is actually trying to win like tournaments with D tier characters. You know, that just doesn't make sense.
This is often shared through forum posts, fan-made tier lists, YouTube videos, and esports victories. When a kid called Jason won the Clash Royale tournament in Helsinki, his chosen cards suddenly became massively popular. And the meta can actually act as a self-balancing force. Let's say everyone discovered that a certain character was overpowered and everyone started using it. It's now in everyone's best interest to try and discover strategies that can counter or outperform that favorite. And if players find it, the meta might change. This rolling meta keeps the game fresh and gives the players who found the counter a real sense of satisfaction. Overwatch's Jeff Kaplan says, regarding the meta changing because players have innovated a new strategy, well, this is the best case scenario. We've seen this happen time and time again. Of course, that's not always going to work. Sometimes the designers will have to go in and change things. If a strategy is overpowered, if a character is never getting played, or if a playstyle is proving annoying, then it's time to swing the hammer. First, the devs need to figure out the exact reason why that character or strategy or whatever is unbalanced. It's easy to see that a character is dominating the matchup charts, but can be harder to pinpoint why. So for a character like Meta Knight in Super Smash Bros. Brawl,
Oh my god, I remember playing Super Smash Brawl I was in high school, and me and my buddy Kyle would always, like after school, it would be like, hey, Cornel, you want to come over? Hey, Julian, you want to come over? And all the boys would just go over and play Brawl, and everybody would be like, like the internet was like taken off and whatnot, and we would always be like looking to figure out what is the best characters that we wanted to play. And it was funny because like everybody had their own favorite character that was somehow just not just different than somebody else. Like my boy Kyle, he would play, what was it, Solid Snake, and he would always like mortar slide and everywhere, like do that shit everywhere. I was the Meta Slave. I did Meta Knight, and our other friend Julian, who did he play? I think he played like Zelda, the one that could like change from like the princess into like the ninja or whatever. And then our boy Patrick, he didn't care what the meta was. He's just like, I'm playing Link. He would just always play Link. Oh man, and it would always end up being like me versus Kyle at the end.
it was mostly because of his extremely fast attack speed and an ability to cancel his momentum in midair and avoid being KO'd. He had lots of advantages and not enough trade-offs, and other characters don't have the tools to counter him. Once the source has been found, you've got to figure out what to nerf and what to buff. Nerfing means making something less powerful, like reducing their speed, limiting their range, or cutting down their strength. Buffing is the opposite, making it more powerful. You don't
It is now called adjustments. We have made some tuning adjustments. We have gone through a tuning process. We've made some adjustments to the game.
necessarily have to buff the weak characters and nerf the strong ones though. You could leave an overpowered character alone, but buff the characters who counter them and still solve the same problem. Make sure you watch this Core A gaming video on why buffs are generally better than nerfs. Balance changes can be anything from a tiny tweak to a character's movement speed to a complete overhaul of how a character works. It might be a fundamental change to the rules of the game. Rainbow Six Siege made attacking and defending more balanced by changing the match time to 3 minutes. And sometimes you've just got to pull things from the game entirely, like when Epic scrapped the overpowered Infinity Blade in Fortnite. But any change is going to affect players, especially those who are very used to the way a specific character or its counters work. So when the game gets patched, it's important to communicate the changes through patch notes.
That's a whole nother topic. You know, I've seen so many games go through like the adjustment process, and how many times have I seen a game come out with a patch, like a patch note, and there's like a list of things that they adjusted, and then there will be like things that they adjusted that they just I'm not talking about Overwatch. There's been other adjustments that they've made called shadow adjustments that they just chose not to say what they did or not, because they just don't want to have to go through the whole explaining process of why or they did something or didn't do something. You know, like I think Riot was one of the original developers that started the whole, like, these are the changes we made and here's our paragraph underneath on why we did them. I think those type of patch notes are fantastic.
Videos and so on. In fact, patch notes are so important that Riot once put out a note saying a champion was nerfed, but forgot to actually implement the nerf in the code. Even so, the character's pick rate plummeted, and even his win rate decreased a bit. Didn't
funny.
I say that player
Hey, 200 patch notes. You can't win them all.
psychology was an important factor? Now, at the beginning of this video, I said that balance was about trying to make characters equally viable among players of roughly the same skill level. But what happens when players aren't at the same skill level? Well, a lot of highly competitive games use matchmaking systems to pair up similarly skilled players.
Yep.
But for more accessible, party-style games, we may want to build in negative feedback loops, or catch-up mechanics, where players who are doing poorly get a helping hand.
Yeah.
Examples are the death streak mechanic in Modern Warfare 2,
Yep.
where you get a special bonus for dying a whole bunch.
Yeah.
And the item system in Mario Kart, where powerful items, including that pesky blue shell, are only given to players at the back of the pack.
Yeah. And another thing that happened was a game that I played. It was called Marvel vs. Capcom 3. They had the whole X Factor system. And in MVC, you had 3 characters. And let's say if you use your X Factor with 3 characters, you only got X Factor level 1. It made your character faster, hit harder, so on and so forth. But if you had like only 1 character left, and you pop X Factor, it lasts longer, you do way more damage, and you are way faster. And that was a whole thing for Marvel vs. Capcom.
These are pretty contentious and must be used sparingly. We could also reduce the value of skill by adding in more luck. We see this in most family board games like Snakes and Ladders and Monopoly, which are heavily based on the luck of the die roll. But in video games, you see this in games like Apex Legends, where your chances of winning are shifted based on what goodies you find when you drop into the map.
The loot.
Games can also offer handicapping modes, and in team-based games, we can give players alternative playstyles that allow them to contribute to the team without needing to do highly skilled frontline action, like being a medic or an engineer. So balancing a game is a really challenging job. The more you make characters distinct, the harder it is to put them on an even playing field.
Yeah.
And that's not taking into account players of unequal skill levels. We can try to design in trade-offs to ensure characters don't have too many advantages, and give characters counters so they can keep each other in check. But even the best designs won't stand up to scrutiny when put in front of millions of players. So we need to constantly determine the balance by watching win rates, matchups, pick rates, and player feedback. And while hopefully the meta will naturally shift in response to imbalance, sometimes devs have to go in and make the hard changes. And then you introduce a whole new character and everything breaks again.
Yeah.
Ugh, I said this wasn't an easy job. So let me know, what do you think is the most balanced game around? And have you ever played a game where the devs just got it oh so?
Probably chess and checkers. Super balanced. The only disadvantage is who goes first.
Wrong. Let me know your experience with balance in the comments below. Thanks for watching. I had a lot of help on this one, from people who know multiplayer games really well to developers who have worked on games like League of Legends, Dirty Bomb, and Rainbow Six Siege. There's definitely more to talk about, like balancing multiplayer maps in shooters, but we can get to that in the future. For now though, thanks and goodbye.
Nice. Yeah. Another great video from Game Maker Toolkit. Oh, I'm 4 years too late though. But the video's still relevant. I mean, but like I said in the beginning, like a lot of the times, if something new comes out, new gun, new character, whatever, it's always incentivized to come out with an overpowered character, then be overpowered for a little bit, and then nerf it, just because there's some sort of money incentive attached to it. I mean, we could talk about the ideals and morality behind that, but I mean, that's a whole nother thing. But overall, good video, another banger. And yeah, that's pretty much it. All right, take it easy, guys. See you on the next one. Peace.